With escalating gas prices, the cost of food is steadily rising. Today on the lunch counter, it's all about food sovereignty and how eating locally impacts more than just your wallet.
Hi, my name is Colleen Ross. I am the owner of Waratah Downs Certified Organic Farm. I've been farming for 30 years, and I am the Vice President of the National Farmers Union of Canada. And I just encourage everybody this year to find a farmer and make more responsible food choices.
Hi, I'm Abra Bryn. I'm the president of the Kootenay Co-op and a founder of the BC Food Systems Network, and I work with farmers and others across the province to help strengthen our local food systems.
Hi, I'm David Reed. I'm the Executive Director of West Kootenay Eco Society, and I just want to encourage people to get out there, go to your farmers markets, and participate in our local food economy. We've been trying to increase the number of farmers that we have at our markets because obviously it's a great place to go to get your produce because you can interact with the person who's growing your food and ask them whatever question you might have about their growing practices. But it's been a little interesting because as we've tried to increase the number of produce vendors, we've actually gotten some resistance from some of the produce vendors in terms of saying, well, how many produce vendors do we need if we're all growing the same thing? So it's a bit of a challenge for farmers markets.
And Colleen, you are used to experiencing farmers markets in a much larger urban center in Ottawa. It'd be useful to hear your perspective as a farmer.
Right. Well, I can completely commiserate with that thought because I have 200 acres of certified organic production, and out of that, 12 of it's in vegetables. And, we're all growing, many of us are growing the same things. It's how you present it and your credibility with your clientele, and you develop that clientele, which is based on trust. Our biggest frustration as farmers, I do 2 farmers markets, a large farmers market in Ottawa. One of our biggest frustrations are, 100% of my income comes from agriculture, comes from farming. Our biggest frustration is the part-time farmers who are maybe just big gardeners who are bringing their excess to the market and selling below our cost of production. We consider that dumping, and it really is a major issue for us, and it happens a lot.
Do you think the 100-mile diet is feasible, and why or why not?
I think the 100 miles feasible in certain seasons.
Yes, I think it's feasible, definitely. Within reason, there are probably certain necessary parts of a diet that might be challenging to get within 100 miles, but for the most part, I think the majority of the diet should be achievable within 100 miles.
In theory, it's great, but in practice, it's not always practical, but you can do as best you can from your 10-foot diet to your 10,000-mile diet.
When you're talking about your customers coming to you because they know you and they trust you, those relationships are really what the whole food system's about. It's about our relationship to our place, our relationship to each other's, and our relationship to the food that we're eating. So that's where I think this 100-mile diet thing has so much strength, is it's encouraging us to build those kinds of relationships.
I think it's also encouraging people to think much more about their food beyond just the question of what it costs, but they're thinking about where it came from. They're thinking about seasonality, and at this time of the year, there's only so many things that are actually ready for harvest, particularly if you're looking at vegetables and fruit. And so there has to, ideally, the average consumer is thinking about where the food is coming from, and are there ways that they can source it to ensure that wherever it's coming from practices that they support and from fair compensation for the people involved in the food system, etc. Because there was probably a time where many communities across North America were self-sufficient. The carrying capacity of the land matched the population base, but we've long since left that behind. And so trade goes back a long time as well. Trade is an important part of our food systems too, but it needs to be thoughtful and fair. And so it's not just about caring about the environmental degradation and the conditions of the workers here, but also everywhere else that we might be getting things like our coffee and our chocolate and our bananas and the things that we simply can't source locally year-round.
I think our plates need to tell a story. Like for me, my story on my farm was, and I don't have a 100-mile diet, I have about a 100-meter diet, is that all this food was grown on our farm and we harvested, and You know, and so that's the story. Here, you know, while I'm living in the Kootenays, I can tell a story that a lot of the food is grown in my garden now here in the Kootenays, but that chicken comes from the co-op, from that local organic chicken producer, or that lamb came from my friend in the high prairies in Alberta. So my food is still telling me a story. And if your plate is only telling you the story that says save on or save easy, then it's really not a very interesting story. And I think that's where we need to change the story of the food that's on our plate. So it's all, once again, it's about that relationship. It's about knowing your food and knowing your farmer. And it's essential. And it's not just about the romantic idea around that. It's about building a strong food security, food sovereign Kootenay region, where farmers are elevated in their place in society. We have celebrity chefs. We hear about all these celebrity chefs, TV shows about celebrity chefs. We need celebrity farmers, and we need more of them. And when I've been traveling throughout the Kootenays, as far as down into the Okanagan, farmers are really struggling. And you know, we don't have a lot of farmers here, but they're not making enough money. But we have the population in these communities, and certainly within a community like Nelson, more farmers should be growing more food and being economically viable while they're doing it. We need more mouths to be buying this food and having their plates tell a story.
Mm-hmm. You know, from my experience and research, a lot of the policies have shifted to support large-scale, you know, industrial-style farms, and those practices are not always what's good for the land, and they're oftentimes, just because there's no market for, if you have 200 acres of all the same thing, you're not going to be able to sell all of that product locally. So you have to participate in a larger supply chain. So if we have policies that support local small farms feeding people, the UN actually says that's the way to provide food security. It's not by economies of scale, it's by community scale.
We need a food policy in this country that cares about people, puts nutrient-dense food easily on everybody's plate, and makes sure that farmers, small farmers, medium-sized farmers across Canada and in BC can make a viable, dignified living by growing good food.
So I think if we're actually going to be looking at our full dietary needs, though, in my lifetime, since growing up on a farm in the Okanagan, we have lost so much of the infrastructure that supports that range of foodstuffs that we all need. And like, for instance, right now in the Creston Valley, there's 6 dairies left. It wasn't so long ago there was 14. There's 6 or 7 up in the Barkly Valley. All of that, those sort of dairy clusters that remain in the province, they're shipping their fluid milk out long distances to get processed. Whereas before, there used to be locally based processing of fluid milk. When I was a kid, we had a local ice cream maker and a fabulous cheese maker, and the fluid milk was bottled right there. And we even had delivery right to the farm if we wanted it. So we need to reevaluate how we can rebuild that infrastructure so we can be freezing and canning and processing and slaughtering and all of those things that the backyard gardener can't produce for themselves, but that are an essential component of their diet.
What are your thoughts on backyard chicken farming?
I think it's great. Why not?
If we can raise our own food, we don't have to buy it from somewhere else. It's as local as it gets, and I think it brings you closer to understanding where food really comes from.
I think we should leave it to the chicken farmers.
I think they're smelly and messy, and if I want eggs, I'll go to the supermarket and get eggs. And if I want a chicken, I'll go to the supermarket and get a chicken.
I'm for it if people know what they're doing and raise the chickens humanely and do not annoy their neighbors. I think it's great.
I'm going to change the subject a little bit here because it brings up an issue that's been a bit of a hot topic in Nelson, which is the urban chicken issue. Abra smiles. It's been apparently on the plate of City Council for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, a recommendation to relax the bylaw that prohibits you from having chickens inside the city of Nelson in sort of a backyard capacity. And there are a couple of concerns that are raised. One is nuisance for neighbors in terms of noise and smell. And then the other issue is as a bear attractant, because we do have a significant population of bears around our area, and we've had some problem bears in the last few years as well. So how do backyard chickens contribute to our picture of local food security?
Well, I think backyard chickens are a great idea. I used to live in Australia, and many of the towns and city in Australia, people had backyard chicken coops. It wasn't like if you have a bylaw that allows backyard chickens, I guarantee you that not every family in Nelson is going to put up a chicken coop in their backyard. I think maybe having a limit. I think this is not just about food security, but having chickens in your backyard is about food literacy, and it's a page in that book is food literacy. These are chickens. Eggs actually come out of chickens' bums, kids.
Right.
It's what happens, and this is part of food literacy. Right. And it's not going to feed a family, but it's going to make them more literate. It's going to get children and families involved with feeding an animal, caring for an animal, collecting those eggs and bringing those eggs into their house and being able to tell the story about those eggs.
It's surprising, speaking of food literacy, it's surprising how few people understand the really basic but amazing, of course, evolution from seed to fruit. The whole process, the requirement for pollination, the role that the flower plays. These are, to people who have gardens, these are fairly basic concepts. But for a lot of people, this is a foreign concept. Like to see a plant go from a seed back to a fruit and then a seed again is something that a lot of people don't have experience with.
And I think that actually the whole food literacy piece is such a critical part of building the respect for farmers again, because they are so essential to us in every single day of our lives. Very few of us actually could produce 100% of our food, so they're still an essential part of our daily lives, and yet we tend to not have much respect or time for farmers. Not that they have much time for us, they're busy farming, but if we understand, like if we were raising our own chickens in our backyard and recognize the challenges of keeping them healthy, of what it takes to feed them, of providing them adequate shelter through 4 seasons in a fairly challenging environment, of ensuring they have adequate water, of knowing what to do with those pesky roosters. Like there's so many dynamics just involved in raising a chicken that you would have much more respect, I think, for anyone who is raising them commercially. And so I think that our reverence and respect for both the food and for the farmers is increased when we actually are engaged in food production in some way ourselves.
I look at food, we're not buying food, we're investing in food. I'm investing in my family's nutrition, I'm investing in my nutrition. Nutrient-dense food that is meaningful, that tastes fabulous, every meal is a celebration, and it's something that we're not taking for granted.